The bullet didn't kill him. It tore through the air and found the man beside him. At 24, my grandfather learned how close death stands. Close enough to breathe on your neck. The ground shook. Others were screamed. Smoke swallowed the sky. And in that moment, nobody felt breath. They were told to move forward. No questions. No hesitation. That pause between fear and obedience is where man disappears. Today, the war is quiet. Every evening, just before the sun disappears, I sit beside my grandfather. The same hands that once carried a rifle now rest quietly on his knees. He survived the battlefield, but some memories don't surrender. They wait, patient for silence. Some wars end when the fighting stops. Others follow you home. This is my grandfather's story. The war did not end the day my grandfather survived his first battle. It only changed its shape. After smoke cleared, nobody celebrated. The living stood quietly among the fallen, afraid to speak too loudly, as if sound itself might call death back. My grandfather learned that silence was not peace. It was survivor holding its breath. They moved him to another unit weeks later, not because he was special, because there were fewer men now. He never talked about memories. In fact, he said the bravest men he knew were usually the first to disappear. War, he told me, does not reward courage. It tolerates obedience and punishes hesitation. At night, when the camp settled into uneasy stillness, he lay awake, listening to men pretend they were sleeping. Some whispered prayers, some cried softly, some stared into the darkness, already gone in their minds. That was where the war truly lived, not at the front, but in the waiting. My grandfather learned how to read fear without words. The tightening jaw, the shaking hand disguised as a stretch, the eyes that refused to meet yours because they had already seen tomorrow. He learned something else too. Every soldier carries two selves, the one who follows others and the one who remembers. The second one is heavier. Back home, on the wounding veranda, he adjusts his seat slightly as the evening breeze moves through the trees. The war no longer steals his sleep every night, but it visits often enough to be remembered. I sit beside him, careful not to interrupt the quiet. He doesn't like to be rushed when he speaks. He says memory is like an old man. If you push it, it turns away. When I came back, he finally says, his voice low, I didn't know how to sit still. His hands rest on his knees, strong hands, scarred hands, hands that once carried weight no human should carry. He tells me how normal life felt unreal, how laughter sounded distant, how crowds felt dangerous because nobody watched their surroundings, how people complained about small things, traffic, heat, noise, as if the world had not nearly ended elsewhere. He didn't blame them, but he could not join them either. That was his first mistake. He married young, he tells me, not because he was ready, but because he wanted something that proved he was still human. Love felt like a shed then, a way out. But war does not live just because you asked it to. He brought it into his marriage without knowing. The silence, the anger that arrived without warning, the way he needed control when life felt unpredictable, the way he pulled away when he was needed most. I thought providing was enough, he says. I didn't know presence matters more. He looks away when he says this. That is how I know this part still hurts. In uniform, he had been taught to suppress emotion. At home, that same discipline became distance. He mistook strength for hardness. He mistook leadership for authority. And slowly, without a single dramatic moment, the people he loved learned how to live around him instead of with him. This was not the war he trained for. He tells me about a night years later when he woke up standing in the middle of the room, his heart racing, his wife crying quietly in the corner. He didn't remember leaving the bed. He didn't remember the dream, only the fear on her face. That was the night he understood something important. Surviving the battlefield did not make him whole. Leaving it behind required a different kind of courage. The sun sinks lower now. The light on his face turns soft, forgiving. Time has rounded the sharpest edges, but it has not erased them. I made mistakes, he says, not proudly, not bitterly, just honestly. I thought war was the hardest thing a man could survive. He continues. I was wrong. He exhales slowly. Living afterward, that is the real test. Don't interrupt. Some lessons must arrive on their own. War does not always announce its turning point with explosion. Sometimes it arrives folded into a simple command. My grandfather tells me about the morning his unit was reassigned. No speeches, no explanations, just names read aloud and directions given. Men who had survived together were suddenly separated. That was when he first felt fear that had nothing to do with bullets. Because in war, unfamiliar faces are more dangerous than the enemy. They were sent closer to the front, closer than before. The kind of place where maps stop being accurate and decisions are made in seconds. He remembers noticing how quiet everyone became, not calm, just resigned. Then came the order, an order that made no sense. Advance, not wait, not observe. Advance. He says that was the first time he questioned command and the last time he hesitated. They moved forward anyway, and within minutes, the ground answered them. Gunfire erupted from places they couldn't see. Men dropped before they understood what was happening. Training vanished. Instincts took over. He ran, not away, but forward. That decision saves his life and took something else. He stops talking for a moment. On the veranda, his jaw tightens slightly. There are things you do to survive, he says quietly, that follows you forever. What did he do that day that still refuses to let him sleep? Let's find out. There is one face my grandfather never forgets. Not an enemy, a friend's face. He tells me about a young soldier, barely trained, always joking, always talking about home. The kind of man everyone assumed would survive because he believed he would. During that advance, they were separated by smoke and noise. My grandfather had his name shouted once, just once, then silence. When the fighting slowed, he found him alive, but not whole. The look in that man's eyes was not pain. It was realization. The moment someone understands their future has been taken away. My grandfather held his hand, promised help was coming, promised things he did not know were lies, because help didn't come in time. That was the first promise war forced him to break. He carried that moment home with him, into his marriage, into his silence, into the way he avoided making promises later in life. On the veranda, his voice lowers. After that day, he says, I stopped believing survival meant winning. And then came the mission that broke his faith completely. Not everyone who survives war feels lucky. Some feel accused. My grandfather explained survivor's guilt in a way I have never heard before. He says it's not sadness, it's confusion. The mind trying to answer a question without logic. Why me? He was promoted after that mission. Recognition for efficiency, for discipline, for doing what was required. But every step forward felt like betrayal. He became colder, sharper, more controlled. Officers praised him, soldiers feared him. At home, years later, that same control became distance. He believed emotions were weaknesses that cost lives. He didn't know they were also what kept families together. I didn't know how to come back, he admits. So he stayed at war, even when he's already back. Even after leaving it, and that decision would cost him the one thing he never trained to protect: marriage. My grandfather says, marriage is the first battlefield without orders, no ranks, no commands, no victory controls, just presence, and he felt it. He walked, provided, protected, but he did not listen. He did not soften. Neither did he heal. He mistook silence for strength until one night everything cracked. An argument that was not loud, just exhausted. His wife standing in front of him, eyes steady, voice tired. I don't know how to reach you anymore. That sentence hit harder than any explosion because there was no defense, no training, no escape. That night, he realized war had taught him how to survive, but not how to live. People think wisdom arrives early. It doesn't. It arrives when mistakes are already permanent. My grandfather tells me he learned how to be gentle after he learned how to be feared. He learned how to listen after silence had done its damage. He became softer as time ran out, kinder, more present, But time does not rewind. On the veranda, the sun is almost gone now. His face is half shadow, half light, like a man standing between past and peace. If I could tell my younger self one thing, he says slowly, I would tell him this. He stops, looks at me, and for the first time, his voice trembles. But that lesson came too late. Stay with us in the next video to know exactly what he would like to say to his younger self. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on that notification button. Thank you for listening.